Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, welcoming you to another video covering the somewhat quirkier side of gaming history. Sometimes I will learn obscure gaming facts here and there which lead me down rabbit holes into creating videos. However, sometimes these creative processes start completely by accident. During a recent eBay search, rather than typing in home consoles, I accidentally typed in the search term Holmes console, which made me chuckle, as Holmes is apparently gangster slang for a friend, an amusing term I used to regularly hear used by Eddie Guerrero. So, this then got me wondering if there were in fact any Holmes consoles, and sure enough, there was. I discovered the Zeebo, a system created in Brazil and created specifically for the Brazilian and Mexican markets. From there, I had a quick Google search for Zeebos, ordered one, and soon enough I had my elderly next door neighbour knocking on my door informing me that he had taken in my drug package from Mexico. Banter. This whole series of ridiculous events actually all happened, by the way, thus far making it perhaps my most favourite console procurement of all time. I love the concept of covering the Zeebo on this channel, as it's always fun to cover parts of gaming history which are specific to certain countries and regions. For example, in the past on here, we have looked at the Brazilian Master System exclusives. We have covered the Greek video game ban, and we have even looked at the Sega Saturn's surprising level of success in Portugal. Today though, to help me on my quest to talk Zeebo history, I am joined once again by a fantastically underrated YouTuber. He is the Portugueser known as Stika, who based on his Portuguese language skills is much better equipped at unravelling the Zeebo story than I am. So, over to you, Stika.
Ah yes, the Zeebo, the Brazilian console that nobody expected, surprising even the gamers in its own home market, which was then discontinued just as fast and abruptly. Not a whole lot is known about the Zeebo, especially if you don't speak Portuguese or don't live in Brazil or Mexico. But today, we thought it'd be a cool idea to talk about the console, learn its origins, and what became of it. Oh, also, don't expect good footage for this video. Almost every Zeebo footage I could find out there is pretty blurry. So, consider yourself warned. Zeebo is the brainchild of Tectoy's mobile division founder, Reinaldo Normand. Now, you might be familiar with the name Tectoy, as it was the official Sega distributor in Brazil, developing a few of their own games for the Mega Drive or Sega Genesis, like Duke Nukem 3D, or sprite-swapping the Wonder Boy games on the Master System. The company was very popular in Brazil during the 90s, but once Sega left the hardware market, Tectoy's future became uncertain. The company couldn't survive on just toys, so it branched out into other markets, including DVD players and mobile devices. But despite that, the name Tectoy was slowly fading into obscurity. However, between 2007 and 2008, plans were made to re-enter the console market. This time with their own product, which we obviously know today as the Zeebo.
The Zeebo I received in the post came in this spiffing box, which interestingly was not mentioned in the eBay listing. So, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Inside the box was the Zeebo console itself, which in many ways kind of resembles the Nintendo Wii, only with a curvier silver finish. There is an SD card slot and 2 USB ports located on the front of the system, and there is a third USB located on the back. The back of the system also features a micro USB slot, along with a composite video slot for high-end 2008 gaming, just like the Nintendo Wii itself. Also located in the box, along with the system wires, was this Zeebo card, along with a Zeebo branded USB keyboard, which personally I find quite aesthetically pleasing. The system also came with this controller, which is pretty comfortable in my hands to be fair. The joypad is clearly heavily inspired by the PlayStation controller and featured a D-pad on the left, 4 buttons on the right, and even 2 clicky analog sticks. The controller only features 2 shoulder buttons though, as opposed to 4, like what you got on the PlayStation. Anyway, now we have had a quick look at the exterior of the system, let's go back to Stika for more history.
So regarding the system, Tectoy did not have the financial support or structure to develop its own hardware. So, it entered a partnership with Qualcomm, a mobile company better known today for the Snapdragon line of mobile CPUs. Back then, the company would also develop mobile components and even had a fairly popular operating system called Brew, which became Zeebo's operating system. At the time, Brew was famous for being difficult to pirate, which was seen as a major selling point for Tectoy. Not that they had a whole lot of choice though, as Qualcomm was keen on competing with Apple's recently released iPhone 1 and wanted to create an ecosystem similar to that of Apple, so in Qualcomm's eyes, Brew was mandatory. The hardware itself was based on mobile components in a time when smartphones were still in their infancy. I mean, in 2007 and 2008, most people were still using Blackberries, Nokias, and the first iPhone was seen as the next step in phone evolution. And to be fair, Zeebo's hardware was really advanced by phone standards, as Tectoy was under the impression the hardware would be capable of producing graphics similar to the PlayStation Portable. Except, it'd be a home console instead of a portable system. I should also point out that Brazil also has a high import tax, which still lasts to this day, which meant consoles were extremely expensive. Just to give you an idea, the PS4 Pro over there costs around €700 or $800. In fact, the PlayStation 2 didn't even launch in Brazil until 2009, the same year as the Zeebo launch. Yes, you heard me right. By the time the PS2 launched in Brazil, most of us were already playing on our Xbox 360s and PS3s. And the PS2 had been largely forgotten elsewhere. That's how bad the import tax is over there. Admittedly, Microsoft got around this issue by setting up factories in Brazil and assembling Xbox 360 consoles within the country, thereby avoiding the import tax. Anyway, back to the Zeebo. The console wouldn't have any physical media. Instead, you download every game off its own online service, ZeeboNet. The console's hardware was purposely kept simple and behind the times as a way to drive the costs down, as Tectoy's strategy was to target the emerging markets such as Brazil, Mexico, India, Russia, and China. And so, in 2009, with everything in place, Zeebo would finally launch in Brazil, to dismal sales. Part of the reason for this was the price, which was somewhere around the €100 or $150, which doesn't sound like much, but as it turns out, you could now buy PlayStation 2s for around that price off of parallel markets. So of course, everyone chose the PS2 instead. It also didn't help that its launch lineup was pretty weak, consisting of Need for Speed Carbon, FIFA 2009, and Brain Challenge. And in case you haven't noticed, all of these are mobile games. Yes, even the FIFA and Need for Speed ports are based off of the mobile games, not their PC or console counterparts. You see, not only was the console's hardware based on mobile architecture, it also only had 1 GB of internal flash memory. Now granted, it could be expanded through memory cards, but it was still a limiting factor. In fact, the largest Zeebo game ever made is a whopping 29 megabytes, so clearly there are some limitations here. In order to get people to use the ZeeboNet, anyone who purchased a console would also be able to download Quake 1, Quake 2, and Prey Evil completely free. I've never played the Zeebo versions of these games, but Quake 1 and 2 actually look like pretty good ports. In fact, from what I've seen, I'd wager this might have been the best console port of Quake 1 at the time. I mean, up to that point, we only had the Saturn and Nintendo 64 versions. Despite that, you might notice that no matter what we do, we only seem to be posting low-quality Zeebo footage. And that's because despite being launched in 2009, it did not have HDMI. In fact, the console runs at 640 by 480, which was a pretty low resolution for the time, and didn't even come with the best cable options when plugging into your TV.
Further to this, I have attempted to capture Zeebo footage myself, but for whatever reason my capture card hates for Zeebo. I have not come across this problem with systems before, so my only inference is that I normally capture footage through a HDMI to SCART converter. All the composite systems I usually plug in run at 50Hz, whereas one would assume the Zeebo runs at 60Hz, thus meaning the SCART really does not like it. Instead, I have captured some footage the old-fashioned way, by filming the TV, of all things. How very lowbrow. Yuck. At first, I must admit I was slightly terrified to plug my Zeebo in, as I have never tried plugging in consoles from this region in Europe. However, I managed to use a step-up converter to get this thing powered on. Once powered on, the Zeebo logo atop the system glows this beautiful blue hue, while simultaneously part of the front of the system also glows blue. I feel that this is a lovely touch, which deviates away somewhat from the blatantly obvious Wii design inspiration. Once powered on, I must admit, I do not understand the language displayed on the system. In fact, I am so ill-educated in this field, I cannot even tell you if it's in Spanish or Portuguese. But, despite this, fortunately, this Zeebo unit does have a few games to sample on it, as I am displaying now, including Pac-Mania. So I am getting the opportunity to see what this 3G based system feels like to play, and from this brief experience it feels comfortable and responsive, so nothing to complain about really. Now, being somewhat of a Zeebo noob, I would absolutely adore it if someone could point me in the direction of a load of Zeebo ROMs and tell me how to install them on the platform, as I would love to create a video on the system's library and experience what this system has to offer in detail. So please leave your comments down below if you know anything with regards to this. Anyway, back to some history. Yeah.
The Zeebo's hardware was lagging behind not just its contemporaries like the Xbox 360 and the PS3, but even behind that of the PS2 and the PlayStation Portable. But it seems part of the reason was the Brew operating system, which reportedly consumed half the console's resources. 2 months after the Brazilian launch, it would also be launched in Mexico, to equally dismal sales. In fact, 3 months after the initial launch, the console would also see its first price drop. When you couple that with a selection of just 29 games during its first year, things were not looking great, but they were about to get much worse. In 2010, the console wouldn't receive any new games until April, where they released 7 Data East games, such as Bad Dudes and Super Burger Time. But Quake 1, Quake 2, and Need for Speed were also being removed from the store. Things were not looking good, and so Tectoy tried to shift gears. The Zeebo was already heavily inspired by the Nintendo Wii in terms of design, featuring a similar color scheme, and the controller itself resembles that of a Wii Pro controller. Which is pretty ironic considering Tectoy is still the official Sega publisher. But then, they went all out by introducing the Zeebo Boomerang. This was a motion controller which used the console's infrared capabilities. And Tectoy even started developing Zeebo-exclusive motion-based games. As far as I can tell from second-hand experiences, the controller's accuracy left much to be desired, and the games weren't much better either. But once again, things didn't pick up. Later that year, the Zeebo service would also launch in China, though sadly, information on this is very scarce. As best as I can tell, rather than being a video game console over there, it was somehow related to digital television, allowing users to download apps and HD content. Which is pretty ironic considering the console itself can't output HD. Which leads me to believe the console may have just been a cable box which shared the same name and was published by the same company, Tectoy, who in the meantime had established offices in several countries under the Zeebo name. I can't really find any information on how well it did over there, but it seems safe to assume that it didn't produce the desired sales numbers either. Oh, and the Russian and Indian launches? Those never occurred, likely due to poor sales in the other regions. Towards the end of that year, Tectoy tried a last-ditch effort, this time marketing the console as an educational system, bundling it with a keyboard and integrating internet and browser features as well as educational games. Unfortunately, its online capabilities were limited as it didn't have any flash support, limiting the websites it could access from a hardware standpoint. And it seems users could only access pages and websites which had partnered up with Tectoy, making its usefulness even more limited. By the end of 2010, things were looking dire, with poor sales, only 28 game launches, and even more games being removed from the store, including Prey Evil. Qualcomm wasn't happy either, as they never signed on to the video game market. Their original intention was to create an Apple-like ecosystem, meaning their vision was to have computers, laptops, phones, and MP3 players which all use the Brew operating system. And Zeebo clearly wasn't what they expected in terms of sales or even end goal. Tectoy did try to establish an internal game development studio which released a series of sports games. Once again, I've never played them, and their quality varied wildly. But it seems some of them were actually pretty good. Despite that, on the 31st of May 2011, the announcement was made that Zeebo is coming to an end, and that ZeeboNet would be shutting down in September of that same year for both Brazil and Mexico. Again, no word on the Chinese market, though it's safe to assume it closed around that same time. It's unknown how many Zeebo consoles were sold in its lifetime. Numbers seem to range between 30,000 and 160,000 units, though it's also unclear if those are just the Brazilian or worldwide numbers. If I had to guess, I'd say it sold 30,000 units in Brazil, with the rest being spread across Mexico and China, with the Chinese market possibly being the biggest seller as it served a different purpose there. Despite that, there were plans for a Zeebo 2, which would have launched in 2012 and would have used the Android operating system. Most likely, it would have been pretty similar to the Ouya, though whether or not it would have fared any better than the first Zeebo is pure speculation at this point.
Ah, excellent, Sticker. Thank you for informing me that there was a planned Zeebo 2 launch. I am sure the story of this platform will make an absolutely tantalising episode of cancelled consoles down the line on this channel. It is sad really that the Zeebo was not a little bit more successful, as all competition is good competition.
You know, this episode is a bit of a downer, but I kinda don't want this to end on a sad note. So why don't we take a look at some games for the console? During its lifetime, the console had roughly 50 games released for it, and some of them do seem pretty interesting. Though I have to admit, I've never played any of them. Action Hero 3D Wild Dog is a 2.5D beat-em-up/platformer. You can chain combos when attacking enemies and collect items. You can also pick up items which help you in your quest. As mentioned before, a bunch of Data East arcade games were brought over to the Zeebo, though whether these were ports or straight emulation is unknown. Games include Bad Dudes, Joe and Mac, Super Burger Time, and a few others. It's odd that Joe and Mac doesn't have any music though, Instead, we only get the sound effects.
Double Dragon is one of the few Zeebo exclusives out there, and it looks pretty damn good. This version was developed exclusive for the Zeebo, and I am not going to lie, I think it looks better than WayForward's Double Dragon Neon. I have heard the gameplay is pretty solid too, and this is a game I am keen to find a way of putting onto my Zeebo.
Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D is a mobile game which was ported to the Zeebo. I have to admit, I'm not big on kart racers, and this one looks okay, I guess. We also have Galaxy on Fire, which is a mission-based space simulator, and it looks pretty good. I totally play this. The sequel is available on Steam, so I guess there's that.
We also have Iron Sight, a 3D Worms-inspired game, except you play as a giant mech. Not much else I can say about this, except that it would probably fare better as a regular mech game instead. As previously mentioned, Quake 1 and 2, as well as Pray Evil, were ported to the Zeebo. The Quake ports seem pretty good, and Quake 2 is even dubbed into Portuguese. Pray Evil I've never played, and what little gameplay footage I could find doesn't seem too great.
Magical Drop 3 is also on the Zeebo. If you've never played this arcade game, you should. Yeah, I know there's other better ways of playing Magical Drop 3, but I'll take any excuse I can get to name drop Magical Drop 3.
Raging Thunder 2 is another phone game for the Zeebo. It looks like a decentish arcadey racer, but it also looks like it has some pretty major frame rate issues. Rally Master Pro looks pretty good and seems to have a smoother frame rate too, probably making it the better racing game.
Resident Evil 4 is based off of the cell phone version, meaning it's a mission-based game in which you need to clear each level of all zombies. The controls seem stiff, but I'd probably play this. I'd just like to know why the zombies have blue skin.
The original Ridge Racer is on the Zeebo as well. It reminds me of the PS1 version, but running at a higher resolution. It also seems to be missing sound effects and voiceovers. Tekken 2 is also on the Zeebo, and once again it is running at a higher resolution than the PS1 version, but it's also missing all the CGI and voiceovers.
Coming to the end, we have another game worth mentioning, Zenonia, which is an action RPG which was originally an Android and iOS game. I've been told that this is often considered as one of the better games on the Zeebo.
And finally, we have Tectoy's internally developed exclusives, the Zeebo Extreme series, which were all sports games. I've heard some of these were actually pretty fun, but never having played them and not really being into sports games, there's not much I can say. If they seem fun to you, check them out, I guess.
And there you have it, the history of the often maligned, often misunderstood Zeebo. A console which nobody expected, nobody wanted, but actually ended up being a charming oddity in of itself. If you do get one of these systems, you won't be able to play any games through traditional means, as it doesn't have any physical media. Thankfully, it is possible to download ROM files and insert them onto a memory card, so you should be able to play its full library.
Whoa, wait a minute, Steaker. Are you telling me you know how to procure these Zeebo downloads? Spill the bloody beans, please, sir. A certain top-hatted gentleman wants to go on a conquest to appropriate these games for himself.
I think you should. The issue with digital-only consoles like this is that we run the risk of having some games being lost forever if copies aren't made and distributed online. And lesser-known consoles like the Zeebo are especially prone to this.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the history of the Zeebo, the South American Homes console. If I eventually manage to load this system with ROM files, expect another video on this bizarre, mostly forgotten platform down the line. But in the meantime, subscribe to my channel and be sure to check out my backlog of content which I've created on all sorts of gaming oddities.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching Magical Drop 3. If you enjoyed Magical Drop 3, be sure to like, comment, subscribe and share this video. All that fun Magical Drop 3. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Magical Drop 3, where you'll find all kinds of awesome rewards. Anyway, I hope you have a great magical drop tree. Bye!
If you're one of my regulars, then I would highly recommend that you subscribe to Steaker on YouTube. He too creates videos on gaming history, and even a gaming connoisseur such as myself has learned a thing or two from watching his videos, so therefore I would advise you all give him a chance. Anyway, my channel, Top Hat Gaming Man, is partly funded from the fantastic support and donations I receive from my Patreon supporters. So shoutouts in the credits to Carl Johnson, Shizuka Kobayashi, Greg Hooper, Richard Clark, Harold Webb, Since Spaces, Kevin Verhaley, David Mountford, Andrew Bazansky, Edward O'Reilly, Tom Elliott, Mark S. Hines, Gary Pinkett, The Gaming Muso, SpongeMat B, Quang DX, Stuart McDermott, Nash Quad, Michael Baker, Andy Aldridge, and all of my other patrons. You are making my dreams more realistic by the day, and if you all keep this up, hopefully I will be a full-time YouTuber sometime in 2019. Thank you all so much.